All right, everybody, welcome to the Leader to Leader podcast series sponsored by the StarQuest Group. I'm Tom Matthew, your host, and today I'm really excited to introduce my guest, Paul Monahan. Paul is a human performance coach, consultant, and works a lot with professional golfers and amateur golfers and aspiring golfers like myself to really help them become better at not only the outer game, but more importantly, the inner game. And we're going to look at that, how that applies to the intersection of leadership, because there's a lot of similarities to what we're trying to do as leaders out there in the work that is being done in the professional sports world, particularly in the golfing side. So welcome, Paul. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Great to be here. Really excited.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you. I've been looking forward to this one because I'm trying to pick up this game of golf. I don't know whether it's a mid-60s thing or what it is, but I'm working on the outer game, but now I got to focus on the inner game. So perfect timing. Tell me a little, if you could tell our listeners a little bit about you, kind of how you got into this, a little bit about what you're doing today.
Of course, yeah. So I spent 25 years in the corporate world, if you will, in terms of my own career arc. I was in sales and leadership inside of some small and some very large organizations. And about 15 years ago, I had this epiphany that I'm like, oh, I think I want to do something, I'm like, when I grow up, I want to, as we all try and explore that, right? I found coaching and I'm like, that's the thing I want to do. And so about 13 years ago, I opened my coaching and consulting practice. And today I work in a couple of different domains. I work in leadership, teamwork, and culture, helping my corporate clients to see their leadership in new ways, for example, to build the kind of teams that create sustainable organizations and thriving organizations. That's a big part of what I do. Mm-hmm. And along the way, because I have a passion for golf and other performance realms, I gained some tools and some knowledge so that I can help my clients in those domains as well. And so today I work as a mental game coach for one of the largest golf instruction companies in the country. And a lot of the work that I do is helping my golf clients to see the game differently so that they can play better, struggle less, and enjoy the game a lot more.
Yeah, fascinating. Just fascinating. So it's really about that inner game world in which you spend a lot of time, which
totally it is. It really is.
Which our listeners can relate to that from the standpoint of on their leadership, even if you're not a golfer out there. To all of you, I mean, we've got some really good, stay tuned because there's some really good application of, it's the same stuff, right? It's the same psychology, a lot of working on that self-talk and the inner game and really focusing on a variety of things. And so, stay tuned. Even if you're not a golfer, if you're a golfer, really turn up the volume because this is really good.
So. It's Masters Week, Tom. So as we film this, right, as we record this, right, I've got my little panel up here on the top of my screen here. So see what's going on in Augusta, Georgia. So it's a big week for anybody in the golf space.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So tell me about sort of this book you wrote. It's been several years ago, called The Most Important Game, and it has really some, play better, struggle less, and enjoy. I look at it as golf more. So tell me about how you kind of evolved on that. And it's great. I had the opportunity to read it, and it's really good chapters. I like the shortness and directness of the chapters. So
yeah,
creative work. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah. It's a little more than a year since I published it. And
okay.
It's essentially a collection of reflections, if you will, on the mental game of golf. But as you point out, there are so many corollaries inside of the golf journey, the journey to gain skills, to play the game at a high level. Like there's so many corollaries between golf and life, between golf and leadership, between golf and creating relationships in our homes and in our communities. Like there are just absolutely so many corollaries. So I wanted to focus on, and I do focus in a lot of the work that I do in the golf space, I wanted to focus on this idea that, in this premise that there's an outside game that we play and we should work to play it well. And so that means building our skills to be a great leader, to be a talented and skilled salesperson in an organization. or a talented financial person, whatever that might be. We should absolutely build those skills. But one thing that nobody teaches us is that the key to building those skills and the key to thriving inside of the kind of chaos that is typical in organizations, the key to that is how you play the game in here, the inside game. And so I call it the most important game, and that's the title of my book. I wrote the book in the context of golf, but as you point out, there's so many applications inside of these chapters and inside of the game of golf that make perfect sense inside of an organization and or a leadership conversation.
Yeah. So what I'm interested in is in the work in the golf space. We'll just camp on that for a little while, and then we can kind of shift over, or we'll go back and forth. I think that's a better way to approach it. On the golf space side of it, how much do you think is the inner game playing as far as the sort of the effectiveness of golfers? I mean, how much impact does it have in your experience?
Sure. There's been a lot of conversation over the years. Like, this is the idea of the mental game in golf. People have been talking about it literally for centuries, because golf has been around since the mid 1500s.
Yeah.
It's been around
Yeah.
a long, long time, right? The
Yeah.
sheep herders in Ireland and Scotland and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I think of it in a couple of different ways today. So you have this game that's in our consciousness as viewers of the game, of the sport, at the professional level. And so if anybody who's listening has sat down to watch golf on the weekend, either the LPGA or the PGA Tour, you know that those players are playing the game at a pretty high level, right?
Right. Yes.
And like, they have incredible skills. They're the best in the world. They're, at any given weekend, you're watching the top 100 golfers in the world. And so they play a different kind of game than, say, you and I would play if we go out on the weekend as amateurs. And like, even high level amateurs are not playing the same game that the pros are playing. And so when you ask, like, all right, well, what's going on and how important is the mental game? It's super important for both, but for different reasons. And so one of my colleagues, he liked to say, I mean, mentors in the game, his name's Todd Graves, and he and his brother Tim own this and operate this incredible instruction academy called Graves Golf Academy. But Todd says the mental game of golf is much easier if your skills are there, right? If you have if you have a lot of skill. And so his point is, we should lean in and we should develop our skill. Makes perfect sense, right?
Right.
It's a lot harder. The game is harder when our skill isn't there. And it creates a different dynamic for the unskilled player, if you will, than the really skilled player. Yes. And so they're doing different things. And so, like, the professional golfer, or the golfer at the professional level, what they're concerned with, they have a lot of the same things that come up for them. They also spend the time working on building the skills to overcome the things that would get in their way, or the interference that would come during a match. Now, we have the same things too, but it's harder for us to overcome some of those things as less skilled players. But many of those same things come up, and it's things like fear and frustration and doubt. Maybe it's what I call shame. It's just a short word for embarrassment.
Right.
And this idea of quit's a big one that comes up too. Like, you can give up on a shot, you can give up on a hole, you can give up on a round. And anybody who's played this game knows what that feels like. So those are the big, I would say, I call them bandits. These are the bandits that will steal your potential in any moment.
Yeah.
And then, in the game, those can show up, and we have to know what to do with those.
So, and those happen, we oftentimes say that in the leadership space, the difference between sports, professional sports particularly, they spend so much time practicing, and then they go into play on the performance side. In the leadership side, we just go. We don't have a lot of practice per se. It's dependent upon mentors and coaches and folks within organizations or outside. If you think about what are some of those bandits that get in the way, what are the most common ones that really impede that progress, that effectiveness? Are there ones that show up, or maybe showing up more today?
Yeah, like in an organizational context.
Yeah, let's look at it in
Yeah, I love
organization.
that. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, yeah, if you think about fear, fear is one of our base emotions, and fear comes up when our our subconscious, if you will, feels like or believes that there's a threat. And a threat can show up in a couple of different ways, and it's really about, if you look at the human psychology of it, the way I like to look at it is that, you know, our brain is really looking to protect us. That's what it's there for. And the part of our brain that really is good at doing this, often referred to as the ego, is all about fulfilling three basic needs. The need to be safe, and that means physically. It also means in our environment today, it means safe financially, because if that paycheck doesn't keep coming in, then we can't eat, right? We can't put the
Right.
the the, the roof over our house. We can't put shoes on our kids. We can't send them to college, whatever that might be, right? So we have to be safe, but we also are. It's important for us to fulfill the need for community or connection with others. That's super important. We like to be part of a tribe and part of a team, right? So that's a big need that our ego is trying to
Hmm.
fulfill. And then the third one is the broadly speaking, it's the need for credibility. It's the need for the people around us to appreciate and value what we bring to the table.
Okay. Yeah.
So if any of those are, if it appears to the ego that any of those are in danger, or there's a risk that these aren't going to show up in some way, then the red flag goes up, and that fear shows up on the scene. And so that's
Yeah.
how I think about fear in an organizational context, because it's full of these organizations they're full of people. And
Right.
so when fear shows up, it's about those three things typically.
Yeah, it's very much aligned with how we approach this on our leadership. Kind of what we do in the leadership work is really we talk about that creative space above the line, and then below the line are more the reactive, and the reactives are triggered by the fear. If you unpack the fear, just like you
Yeah.
talked about, that sort of the safety. In some ways, it's a psychological safety within the work environment. It's the
Hmm.
social connection. It's also the credibility. And so, if you think about that, that drives you below the line, right? That fear, and you're not being able to show up at your best. That's the same for golf too. I mean, that's the parallel, right?
I
Because my
think there's a lot of
frustration when
parallels
I'm
for
out there on
sure.
the court, I spend a lot of time in the frustration mode because it's a frustrating game. And so you
Yes.
can't it's the same thing apply. You go below the line in the golf world of golf too, and then it impedes everything.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I like your analogy of like below the line and above the line. It's, to me, it's like, all right, below the line, it's like I got to make sure all this stuff gets taken care of. Once it gets taken care of, I can sort of transcend above that, and I can be creative. I can be solution oriented. I can be the kind of leader that inspires others and brings out their brilliance, rather than being the one who says, you better get this done or else we're all
Right.
screwed, or, whatever that version
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that growth mindset. It's the possibility. You talk a lot about curiosity in your book,
Hmm.
the power of that whole curiosity. That's got to be part of the game of golf. And it's got to be part of how we lead and how leaders need to really be, because there's a lot of things that can pull people below the line right now. And it's been that way for a while. But as stress levels go up, we go below the line. We know that, right? And so being
Yeah.
more aware of that and how it impacts golf too, because
Yeah.
there's a common theme here.
No doubt. No doubt. And you made me think of an author. I read his book, a couple of his books. Gosh, this is going back maybe 10, 15 years, but Larry Sen is sort of like the father of the modern culture movement, and wrote one of the books he wrote is called Up the Mood Elevator.
Okay,
And
okay.
that's
You
where I
mentioned that in your book.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you do.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And this idea and his notion is that we can get stuck in some very, very difficult, he calls them moods, emotions, feelings, that aren't productive, right? They are also, yes, they're a function of how the ego is really sort of clawing at this idea of like, oh, you gotta fulfill my needs here, universe,
Yeah. Yeah.
But he says that this, if we can, if we can induce a little curiosity or cultivate a little curiosity into our situations, then like it can be just enough of a spark to transcend from being in a mood or a mindset that's not productive to reconnecting to our best, ourselves at when we're productive and when we're thinking of others, not just ourselves, and like all of that. So that's what I really love about his take on curiosity,
Yeah.
like a powerful tool
It
almost.
is the above the line. It's the possibility. It's, yeah, it's so I asked the question around what are the things that definitely get in the way, and I totally see this fear. And for me, when I golf with other guys, that's kind of like the tribe, and you're so
Mm-hmm.
focused on your swing and trying to make it look like you know what you're doing that you completely psych yourself out. And so one of the things that struck me in the book was he talked about missing it. It's like the 5 to 7 second rule versus the
Yep.
10 to 15 seconds, and that if you just get up there and address the ball and then swing as opposed to pre-shot, I think you called it pre-shot planning, where we psych ourselves out. That resonated with me even from a leadership perspective because we psych ourselves out on a lot. I mean, if you think about tough conversations or giving people feedback, we ponder it a lot. It's almost like you over plan it and then it doesn't go as well as if you just were very direct and you kind of, what's the term you use? I forget
Yeah,
what.
it's called miss it fast.
Miss it fast. Yes.
Yeah, miss it fast is it's something that the great and the legendary Mo Norman, the Canadian golfer who was one
Yes.
of the winningest players of all time in Canada, and a super interesting character. Mo Norman used to say, "Miss it fast." Now, his reasoning for that is kind of interesting. Like, what he knew is that the amateur golfer would get up to the ball and they would get over the ball and they would dwell over the shot and they would want to get themselves set. They would take all of this time getting set for the shot and they would hit it crappy anyway, you know?
Yes.
So his reasoning was, look, why don't you just get up there and hit it and see what happens? Because if you're going to miss it, it's better to miss it fast than miss it slow. So it's kind of funny, sort of playing with us amateurs. And this was Mo Norman for the listeners who don't haven't heard of him and don't know, was described by Tiger Woods and Lee Trevino and some of the greats of the game as the greatest ball striker who ever played the game. And this is a guy who he would um, he would give clinics, for example, and there's stories about one time he hit one I think he hit 1,000 drives within 30 yards of a marker on a range.
Hmm.
So this was a guy who could hit the ball really, really straight all the time, right? He never missed it almost, right? So he was sort of teasing us amateurs like, hey, just get in there. Stop overthinking it. And I think your point about, hey, this has a great corollary inside of what we do in organizations. I think it's a great point. Like, why ruminate about, or well, ruminating would be about the stuff that kind of went uh, past or is in the past. But yeah, why overthink that conversation you have coming up? How about just getting in there and start having it? I
Yes.
think that's what you're saying, right?
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was with this group of kind of leaders, senior executive leaders this week, and one of them was talking about the Greatest Salesman, Og Mandino's book, and how
Yeah.
he pulled a few things. I mean, he's in his 60s, but he was talking about that last call before you head out. And it's like so much of in the sales world, it's that kind of that hesitancy around, oh, do I have my pre-call planning stuff done? It's, oh no, you know pick up the phone and just take some action. And I think that's what I took from that best practice that you shared relative to the golfing side. Fail fast. It's a fail fast and fail early, and then make course corrections. I think that's what you're talking about in the world of golf. It applies in leadership as well. So,
Yep, 100%. I think that's a really good way to think about it. I think in any of these performance realms that we step into, it's super easy to be concerned about, even a little bit anxious about, geez, am I ready for this moment? Do I have my stuff together?
yeah.
Because we as human beings, we crave certainty. Now there's a part of us that likes the uncertainty. That's because we go.
But
That's
we
why we
do.
like,
We like
right?
certainty. We like
We
predictability. Yeah.
exactly. We
Yeah.
especially in a corporate or organizational environment, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what that's what, Six Sigma is. It's
Yes.
like all of this,
Yeah.
let's dial it in, let's do the things that we're certain of.
Yes. It's
And
process
so,
efficiency and all of that kind of dial
yeah,
out some of the variable. Yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah. What else kind of comes to mind that sort of is what you zero in on? Like, for example, if you were coaching me, let's just take that, and I shared with you some of the struggles and the frustrations that I have, and where I get in my head and get more frustrated about that lousy shot. I mean, I definitely heard the whole thing around the fear base of it, and for me, it's a kind of it is a when I'm golfing with other guys, there is a social, kind of a everybody's talking about their 250 yards and all this stuff, and there is a social aspect around that I think there's a huge mind game going on there, and kind of how you approach a side. What else comes to mind relative to the golf coaching world
Mhm.
that you see a parallel with leadership?
So, yeah, I think you bring up a good point. And I think one of the big things that I will often talk to my clients about is this concept of perspective.
Okay.
And by that, I mean this idea, like, can we quickly put things into context as we move into, as reality sort of comes at us? That's sometimes how I'll describe it. Like, we move through our day and things are happening, and some of the things we love, some of the things are predictable, some of the things are just terrific, and that's great. But others are not. Others are not so predictable, and others we would think, and we would sort of put in that chaos bucket, that, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened, kind of thing, right? And I think the key to stepping into and performing well inside of any performance environment is, can you process reality as it moves towards you? And can you do it quickly and in a way where you put things into context? And so what that would look like would be like on the golf course. Let's talk of that for a second. It would
Okay.
look like, all right, I just hit it into the water off the first tee with everybody watching, right?
Yep.
And it would be easy to sink into this dark place of, oh my gosh, they think I'm an idiot. I am such a loser. Gosh, I just hit 10 drives on the driving range and I hit him great. And I can't even, gosh, I'm such a loser. And it would be very easy to go to that place, or you might be a place of frustration, right? This game is, well, if I can create some context very quickly, that means, as maybe even before the ball lands, I'm seeing that shot as just simply feedback and not failure. It's just feedback. It's not failure. It's one shot out of about 1,000,000 golf shots I hope to hit in my lifetime. And it didn't quite go where I wanted it to, but look, I got my health, I got my friends, I got my buddies here, and they get a chance to rib me a little bit. And that's a gift I'm going to give them. I mean, right? Could you
Yeah.
imagine a thought
Yeah.
process like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I've stayed much more productive. I've stayed in this place of Paul at my best, not Paul as this needy, unproductive, kind of a person. And so then
Yeah.
if you think about, like, on, how what that looks like inside of an organizational setting, it just might mean, something like, oh, that presentation that I was doing, I really wanted to hammer home this one point and I missed it. I just didn't, and it would be easy to see that moment as failure. But
That, yeah, go
it can
ahead.
be, if I can put that into context, I can say, you know what, there's some feedback there, and I want to look at my preparation, and maybe I can look at what protocols I can put in place so that the next time I have a chance to do that, I do it exactly the way I want to.
That is a huge one, because where it breaks down from what I've experienced and what I've seen in others is that processing reality. The reality is the distort. It is reality, but then we take it and catastrophize it and personalize it, and we can't get out of that quick processing of the reality and really shifting the interpretation, the interpretation of the experience as feedback, or as a you turn it inward. Um,
For sure.
and that absolutely happens a lot out there.
Yeah, I had a mentor about 15 years ago talk really helped me with a lot of a lot of what it's really been the foundation for me for a lot of the ways that which I talk about the inside game. And he was the first one in my life who really said to me that reality just is, and it has no meaning unless and until we give meaning to it.
That's powerful. That's huge. Yep.
And even today, like when I talk to people who have maybe never heard that, the knee jerk reaction is, come on, that's not true. You're telling me that, and you take them through this idea of, well, how do you interpret, how did you can put two, this one I love, Tom. This is a fun one. I'm sure you guys do this in your work with your clients too. It's like, you put a scenario in front of, or you put two different scenarios in front of a group, and you ask the group and the individuals in the group to either tell you what they see or interpret what those things are.
Yeah.
And invariably you get different responses. Well,
Sure.
how is that? Well, it is that way because we take our stories about how the world is supposed to be into reality as it comes towards us, and we give it meaning. And so because you and I come from a different experience set, we might see things and interpret them differently. And so my reality, it's just a perception of reality. It's my perception of reality. And yours might be different. And
All the time.
right?
All the time.
Happens all the time.
And our interpretations of reality is based upon a lot of different things, our stories, kind of our belief systems, our assumptions, all of that. But that gets
Yeah.
interpreted. We talk about the ladder of inference, if you've heard of that. That's how we draw these conclusions so quickly. That interpretation is huge. It plays out all the time.
It's crazy. So yeah, so it works. It works out there on the golf course. Hey, ball just went into the water. What does that mean? Oh, it means there's an opportunity for me to play a shot where I have to drop it in the rough, and I really need to work on my shots from the rough. Well, okay, that's one way to see it. And
That is one way to see it. Yes. Yes.
all right, of course, there's a lot others.
Right. Right. That's fascinating. It's perspective. It's really how the part of it that we spend a lot of time with leaders that we work with is how do you actually build that capacity? And it requires a lot of challenging assumptions around how you view that shot, or how you view the fact that didn't go as well in that presentation as I had wanted it to be. But rather than looking at it and internalizing it, that I'm a failure, I failed on that thing, I shouldn't have done that. Talking about shooting on yourself all the time. That is not productive. But I love this concept of feedback. It's feedback, course correct, let's adjust it. And that takes some capacity building to be able to do that in those split second moments, which are so critical in golf or in life or in leadership, wherever it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you said this before. You talked about this idea that we practice in many domains that are important to us. We practice in golf, we practice in pickleball, we practice in tennis, basketball, piano, whatever it is that we care about that might be a part of it would be clearly a performance environment. But we we don't practice inside of our organizations. Like we just go. I think I heard you say that, right? We just
Yeah.
like, all right, we're going, you know.
Right.
But like imagine if you can practice, if imagine if a leader scheduled time with themselves to practice getting intentional about how they see reality as it moves toward them.
Yes.
It changes their skill set.
Yes. And if you think about that from the standpoint of we take like feedback or having a difficult conversation of having some reframing or a perspective shifting, it's the same thing about how you view that particular practice within organizational life. You can shift it in how you're approaching it based upon it plays out, right? It's like you're showing up with this belief system and this perception of it. You can look at it from an above the line perspective or an below the line, and two very different outcomes based upon what you bring to the conversation or the feedback or whatnot. So
100%. And I love this idea that look, we live our lives, and it makes total sense that we would think that our lives are all about the stuff in our lives. It's about this desk that I'm sitting at, the car that's in my driveway, the mall that I'm going to go to later, or it's all these outside, it's the people around me, it's all of that. And so we think that we live our lives out there because that's what we see. But our lives, our experiences, we live them in here. We live them inside because we process them inside. And like that was another thing that was really revealing for me and on my own journey is that yeah, the way that I interpret reality is entirely within my control. Or at least it's very much in my control.
yes,
Now, like a neuroscientist would say, well, Paul, there's some things that are instinctual. Like if somebody just busted into my office right here with a gun, I wouldn't sit and think a lot about it. I would, my amygdala and my protection system would turn on, and I would duck or karate chop them, or whatever it would take to protect me, right?
right,
But for the most part, we move throughout our days and our weeks and our months with a lot more control about how we interpret reality and how we react or respond to it than we really think or are ever taught. And I think that's incredibly revealing.
yes, yeah, powerful. Anything else come to mind relative to areas that you uh, sort of evaluate and diagnose in the golfers that you work with relative to some of these barriers or obstacles that they run into from an inner
Well,
game perspective?
yeah, for sure. And we talk about fear as one of the bandits.
Yep.
I think frustration is like a close second. Like fear is super important, and I
Yeah.
would say it's like number one. And we have what I would call capital F fears, like the really really big ones. So for some people, that's the fear of going to the front of the room and having to give a presentation. Right,
Sure.
that's kind of a well known fear. That would be capital F. And then there's the small F fears. It's like, when you go to a party and you're like, oh, I don't know, I got to meet a bunch of people, and I'm nervous meeting people. Like that would be small F fears, right?
Mhm.
We those exist. Versions of those exist on the golf course, right? The other big one on the golf course, and I think absolutely inside of an organization, is the second most important bandit or strongest bandit, if you will, and that is frustration. And frustration happens really only for one reason. And it's because the thing that happened right in front of us is out of alignment with what we think should be happening or want to happen. And like that sounds like so, of course, Paul, that's so elementary. You know what I mean? Like it's like, of course that's the case. But if we stop and think about it, how often are we just absolutely frustrated and taken out of our game when it's not necessary? It doesn't have to be that way.
So is that related to where you have a certain expectation or a certain outcome that you're driving towards, and frustration comes from when you don't achieve that, or what actually reality doesn't support where you want to take this thing, and you cling to that outcome, that expectation.
Yeah, I love that word cling. It's like, yeah, you're holding on tightly to your story. I work inside of a model that like it sort of goes like this. It's like um we have a story about what is supposed to happen, and it's formed
Right.
through all of our experiences. And a good example would be this. Everybody has a story about how the waiter or waitress should treat them at a restaurant. And it can go, if you ever do this inside of a group, right? So you go around the room, hey, how should they treat you? How should they treat, and everybody has a story, right? Now, for the most part, it's pretty much the same. The experience we have in any given restaurant is in large part, or at least in some part, based on how tightly we hold to that story about how the waiter or waitress should treat us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we hold really, really tight, it becomes an expectation. I'm like, an expectation is a story with some intensity to it. It's that story, like you said, it's like with by gripping tightly to that story. I would say that's an expectation. And so if I'm at the restaurant and my expectation is that the waiter will refill my water glass at least 3 times during my meal, right? And I'm holding tightly, right, to that story, becomes an expectation. And then that doesn't happen. Now I'm frustrated.
Okay. Yes.
But you're sitting next to me. That's not your expectation. That's not your story. Your story is something different. And so you're not frustrated. And yet we are seeing reality
Same
unfold,
thing.
the exact reality unfold. And yet we
Yeah.
have different
Yeah.
reactions to
That
it.
is really an interesting way to frame that up. That expectations get formed by that really clinging to this strong belief that it should be this way. And then that just further expounds upon it, just sort of inflames that frustration when it doesn't play out that way. So,
100%. And that's the struggle that golfers get into most of the time. Is they go to the golf course. By the way, having watched golf on TV for however many years, and there's a problem inherent in that because of the way TV golf is packaged and produced and given to us. I've been at my desk all morning and watching the ESPN feed of the Masters.
mm-hmm.
Now, why is that important? Well, the ESPN feed, they will often do is follow one group.
Right.
So you see every single shot from one group. Now, the Golf Channel feed or the NBC feed or the CBS feed, typically what they do is there's a producer in a truck and they've got all the holes. And Tom Athenauer, he just made a hole in one on 16. Let's go to 16. Boom, there's a hole in one over there.
Uh-huh.
And, somebody just made a long putt over on 4 and someone just chipped in on 17. So that's all they're showing, the entire telecast over on CBS. And, but on ESPN, when you get their feed, it's Tom and Paul playing together and Paul just missed a really short putt. He stinks, man. I can't believe that, So anyway, I wanted to say that because the typical viewer's notion of what golf should really look like is absolutely skewed. It's just not true.
Because there's zero, for the most part, you're watching the best of the best in their best situation, the best performance.
Yeah. And I love that you said it that way. You're watching the best of the best. And like, if you're only watching on the weekends, guess who didn't make it to play on the weekends? Half of the field who weren't at their best.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the ones who are playing, oh, and by the way, when does the coverage typically start? In the afternoon, Saturday, the afternoon, Sunday? Who's playing in the afternoon, Saturday, the afternoon? The ones in the best group who are actually playing the best. I mean, it's insane if you think about it, right? So
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
skews our notion of what we as mere mortals should be able to do on the course.
So it's an interesting, it's that the way that you described how the TV feeds, um, sort of two approaches to it. In the world of work, we get focused oftentimes about trying to be at sort of this level, and we're comparing ourselves to the great leadership practices, and we have this expectation here. And what we really challenge leaders to do is be a little bit more vulnerable and open and share some of the failures and share some of those moments or decisions that they made that didn't work out, and how did they address that, as opposed to just sharing all the sort of the best shots, if you use it metaphorically. I
Yeah.
think that what you describe here is we love to see success, and we have this picture of what success is. But I think there's more value in really looking at the golfer or the camera crews with them through multiple holes where there are failures along the way. And then I would think it'd be really interesting to see how that golfer responds to that failure. That would be as opposed to just only the highlights, because that's really what it is.
No, no doubt. So like in your example, so is it like, hey, super easy to refer to the article about how awesome Amazon has performed or Google or Apple, like, oh, they're doing this and it's way up here. And we rely on those as examples of what it means to be a great leader or a great organization or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what we don't see is that Amazon made a ton of mistakes. Um, SpaceX has blown up how many rockets? I mean,
Right.
we don't see that, or we
We
just,
don't see that.
yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, I
We
think
only
that's
see the
exactly the
best
same thing.
shots. We only see
Yeah,
the best shots.
that's a
Yeah.
great analogy. I never quite thought of it that way, but I love that.
Yeah. And you can get into a trap where you're constantly frustrated, or you just give up, or all the things you were talking about that gets in the way
Right.
of your
Right.
accomplishment.
Yeah. So, right. So I think the lesson there is that, so part of it is because your question was, all right, well, what does frustration look like and why
Yeah.
is it a
Yeah.
thing? And like, why is it
Yeah.
a and then my response was, well, first we have to talk about expectations and the stories that we create. And so I think like golfers, they have a story about what they should be able to do on the golf course. Cause look at those guys on TV. Look what they're doing. You mean I can't do that? Come on. How hard could that be? Right. So there's that piece of it. Well, and then that begins to shape how they see each moment as it unfolds. Oh my gosh, I hit it in the water again. I, what? That's not how this is supposed to happen.
Right.
And now we really get taken out of our game, literally and figuratively, because we're no longer seeing reality as it is. We're seeing it through the lens of our own expectations. And whereas, so if we cultivate acceptance, and that's really the key here, right? Is cultivating acceptance as an antidote to the bandit. I call it the hero, right? So I say there's bandits and there's heroes, right?
Yes.
So the hero that shows up to overcome or to prevent, well, it's really to overcome the frustration is acceptance. And so the challenge is, can you accept what just happened in this moment and know that it happened? And then decide if you want to do something about it.
So that's another practice, that ability to accept it as it is. That's the reality,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then really the opportunity, if you think about it from a mental inner game perspective, is saying, okay, so I accept it for what it is, and what am I going to do differently? How do I move forward on this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then to challenge your perspectives on how you're actually how you're viewing it, that you accept it for what it is, and then that's your choice on how you're going to approach it.
For
That's
sure. For sure. And I'll challenge my clients, for example, to see if they can, in their minds, metaphorically put on a lab coat as like a researcher or a lab scientist would.
yeah,
Now, the lab researcher or the lab scientist, they don't care about the outcome. They're after the truth. So whichever way the outcome happens is good for them. They're just marking it down and they're just, deciding whether or not we can learn from it. And I think we can take that lesson and that metaphor, we can take that into the way we collaborate with others inside of an organization or our leadership or the way we see outcomes as they unfold.
yeah,
Because then we're still connect. When we do that, Tom, I think we're still connected. We maintain that connection to our true potential. So the bandit of potential called frustration is not allowed to operate if I'm cultivating this idea of accepting everything that happens, no matter the stakes, no matter the circumstances. And I'm celebrating and emotionalizing when it's really good. And that's cool, right? Maybe there's a little fist bump there
yeah.
and a little high five with my colleagues or whatever. But I'm seeing everything else as feedback, not failure.
That's huge, right there. So, as you were talking about that with the leaders that we work with, the 360 feedback assessments, and that's tough for people, or they go through a robust Hogan personality assessment and you get the feedback.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that we really work with people on is how do you accept the feedback as it is, and then as opposed to reject it or get defensive on it, right? You accept it and then you can work with it. And I think that's what you're talking about, the same thing, but you've got to convert that lousy shot that went into the water. That's feedback and not it's a reflection on the bad shot, but it's not an internalization that you're terrible with golf. And that was one of the things that we started out this thing. I struggle with that. It's like, you'll never be a great golfer. Well, I'm just trying to get to good. You'll never be that, but that's that inner game that will totally hijack you every single time. It will. It's
Yeah.
not good.
Well, yeah. It's natural that human beings want to connect the outcome to who they are as a human being.
Yeah.
And one of the things I will say to my clients is, you are not your golf score.
Yeah. In our world, we say you are not your 360.
You weren't. Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because that 360 report is about perceived outcome.
It is, or
from others.
It's your identity. It sort of shapes your identity, how you see it's how others see you as a leader, but it's not who you are at the core, just as that scorecard at the end of the game in the golfing world.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have standards and goals. Those are right. Absolutely. Set them, strive to reach them, but just know that an outcome is just, it can be a very neutral thing. It's just feedback.
Yes.
And actually, a really good shot or a really good performance is also just feedback. So why do we spend so much time on, we got to fix what's wrong,
Right.
Well, no, it makes sense. And part of that is the survival mechanisms that are part of us as humans and us as organizations. Like, those are important, right? We do a lot of wrong things day after day after day that we're not going to be around as an organization, right? But I think being able to separate ourselves, because what we're talking about is human potential, and it's a very it's by definition a very personal thing. So I'm in charge of my own human potential, right? Nobody else is, right? And so it's really personal, and it's about like, all right, I have potential today. I have a potential, and we can decide what that is, like objectively. I'm probably not going to be able to hit the ball 350 yards today, because I don't have that skill set. That's not part of my potential. But maybe I could hit it 250, right? Done that before,
Right.
right? So the question is, can I realize that potential today? And so what matters is like how I show up in that moment. And if I'm stuck in fear, I'm stuck in frustration, it's likely likely going to take me away from that capacity to be at my best.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we when we're talking about the upper below above the line and below the line, that framework that we use, it just has such great resonance, and we do assessments that sort of have competencies and reactive tendencies and all that around that. But really, we talk about, where are you today? It's the same thing. Are you
Mm.
showing up from a below the line perspective, or are you showing up from more of a creative, sort of above the line perspective? It's where are you? It's the location on where are you? And I think that's what I'm hearing from you. That has huge, profound implications.
Yeah, and I think most of the people we know have, for various, you could even say good reasons, have never built like an internal dialogue for themselves so that they can move successfully through these little challenges.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the example of like, everyone has a story about how people should drive. Right.
Right. Right.
Right. And what happens when somebody cuts you off in traffic? Oh, we're, the one finger salutes go up, or we get angry, we want to yell at them, or, some version of that. That's totally common. We've all experienced something like that. And um, the reality is that knee jerk reaction, that default reaction, like we never think about that.
Yeah.
It just happens. It's like, what a jerk.
Right.
And we have control over that if we just stop for a moment to consider ahead of time what a moment like that could mean, and what I could be thinking, saying, and doing that is a reflection of me staying connected to me at my best versus me at my worst.
It's the process reality. And then you have a choice at that moment. How are you going to approach it? And it's instantaneous. It's instantaneous.
Yep,
Yeah.
no doubt.
This is so fascinating. Is there anything that maybe we've not touched on as we start to wrap this conversation up that you would want to share relative to anything? Golf, leadership, anything that has not been mentioned?
Maybe the one thing, Tom, I'm looking at a copy of my book here on my desk as we're chatting, and the subtitle of the book is "Play Better, Struggle Less, Enjoy More." And it's sort of funny how I landed on that. And to me, it's been really a great um, foundation, or a thought to anchor to, that,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you know what? It would be great if I could show up in whatever performance domain that I want to tomorrow. And wouldn't it be great if I could play the game a little bit better, and I could take away some of the struggle that sometimes I get stuck in, and gosh, and maybe even have a little more fun? How much better would life be? And I think that, while I could say that's great for golf, I think it's great for any domain. Can I
I agree.
play? Can I play a little bit better? Can I play the game at a really high level? Because that's really fulfilling, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
Can I not pay attention to the things that would create struggle for me, and can I just can I work on enjoying this experience, um, in new and I'll say profound ways,
Yeah.
because we have that opportunity to have a lot of fun no matter what we're doing, even when it looks like it's getting tough.
Yeah. And one of the speakers that I had, who was in the neuroscience space and leadership, she talks about that you just have to be in that presence mode, and it's sort of slowing things down. And I think That is so. That's a state of being that we have to really make sure that we zero in on that, because that drives really so much of how we approach things, how we perspectives, how we make choices around how do we interpret that bad shot. Is it feedback or is it a reflection on you're terrible at this? What is that? And so I think that presence and consciousness is so important. So
Yeah, no doubt. And in fact, as I think about this model of the bandits versus the heroes, what literally happens is the bandits come along and we get taken out of the present moment. Because what is fear about? Fear is about projecting something in the future.
yes,
What is frustration about? Something that happened in the past. It means
yes,
we're not present,
yes,
right?
that's right.
And
That's right.
so if we can cultivate things like love and passion to overcome the fear, then we're in this moment. I love this. I love being in this space, even though it's a challenge, but I know that challenges make me better.
Yes.
It gets a lot different, right?
Yeah.
So we can
Yeah.
stay in the moment. So
Paul, this has been great. Absolutely. This is fascinating. I think one of the things that you've really shared that's so profound is a lot of good lessons in leadership and golf, but there's just big life lessons too on how we just live our day to day and bring out, that sort of authentic and how we want to be showing up with ourselves and with others. And so this has been great. I really appreciate that. This has been fantastic. So, and I think you've given me a new strategy on this golf game that I have my lesson scheduled for 2 weeks out, and so I'm going to get after this. But it's all about that's the outer game. I think this is the opportunity right here. So
yeah, no doubt. Thank you, Tom. This has been great. Really enjoyed it.
yeah. So thanks very much.
Of course.
Oh,
Yeah.
how do people get a hold of you before you go? How do
Oh,
people
yeah.
get a hold of you? And your
Of
book is called The Most Important Game. Paul Monahan.
Yep.
Amazon, you can Audible, Kindle. It's all available there. How
Correct.
else might they be able to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So I'm at paulmonahan.com and people can reach out to me and, um, check out kind of the work that I do. And there's links to my podcast and to my book and to a bunch of other things as well. So
Beautiful. Awesome.
yeah.
Great. Thanks again. All right. That is a wrap for another episode. And a big thank you goes out to Paul for sharing his insights, his coaching practices, his tips and techniques that he uses when he works with both amateur and professional golfers to help them become better at their golf game. A lot of what he shared today has direct application to us as leaders. And so there were a few things that really stood out for me that I thought was really interesting. And particularly as we are in the midst of the Masters right now, it's interesting to watch the Masters and see how these professional golfers, the best of the best, how they handle with shots that don't go the way that they should. And how are they managing their inner game? And so I jotted down about 3 or 4 things that I thought was most relevant. Building skills is essential. We all know that. We need the technical skills as leaders and as golfers, but managing the inner game is imperative, because golf can be really frustrating, just as leadership can be very frustrating. So being able to be really in tune with what's going on from an inside perspective is something we've all got to work on. Self-awareness, emotional intelligence, being really more socially intelligent is important. He talked about perspective shifting, of how we really need to challenge how we're seeing things. He talked specifically about how we see feedback. So he coaches his golfers around when a shot goes bad and it goes into the bunker or out of bounds or whatever it is, that to really see that shot as feedback, as opposed to I'm not good at this, or I'm terrible at this. And that's where the frustration builds. So take it as feedback and understand that it is reality, and then move towards more of an acceptance rather than trying to see it as sort of a failure on your part. We need to really challenge ourselves to do the same thing in leadership. When something doesn't go well, or when we have something fail, or something not get done, take it as feedback and then really look at it and say, okay, we didn't hit it right this time. Let's figure out how to shift it and change going forward. The last thing that he talked about was frustration, and how do golfers deal with the frustration. And I thought what was really interesting was when he talked about that we all have expectations, And in the Masters, he was talking about we all kind of had that as our expectation, the best of the best. And that's what we see. And so our expectations are way up here. But in reality, it comes in here. And when you've got this gap between expectations in the golfing world and us as leaders and what the reality is, that's when frustration shows up. And so he talked about accept it for what it is and then figure out what's the best course of action. Great stuff. Big thank you to Paul. And to get a hold of Paul, you can reach him at paulmonahan.com, or you can always reach out to him on LinkedIn. One last thing I wanted to mention as we wrap up episode 7 is I've not done this in the past, but I'd like to thank our production team. We couldn't do it without them. And so 3 people, Corey Voss handles all the video production. Big thank you to Corey. Kevin Monahan, who actually uploads and takes care of all the podcasts on the different platforms. And then Tom Goskowski, who manages our website. So a big thank you to all of you. To all of you listeners out there, if you've enjoyed this podcast, we ask that you subscribe, follow, like us, whatever it is, that you stay connected so that you can continue to get these podcasts. And as we conclude yet another L2L podcast, remember, you do bring the weather. It does matter how you show up each and every day. And so my challenge to all of you continues to be to go out and lead with courage, authenticity, and of course, humility. Thanks again. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.